he's also an incredible businessman
Couldn't have a regular job
that most people start business because you figured out a way to make money.
and still have plenty of spending money.
And what motivates you to still do that? All right, so welcome back to the DH. So I'm here with a really good friend of mine, Steve Burdeshaw. I've known Steve for, gosh, as long as I've been alive. He was actually really good friends with my dad, so he's been a family friend. And then as I've grown, really in high school, he became a personal friend, mentor, surrogate father. And so not only is he a great friend and father figure, but he's also an incredible businessman. He's been in business for over 46 years, 47 years, and he's also been a swim coach and an active swimmer, triathlon, runner, biker, the whole 9 yards for 40, 50 years. And so welcome, Steve.
Good to be here.
Glad to have you here. So you own, I'll give a little kind of context just so people kind of know who you are and, in my opinion, why they should listen to you. And so you've been in business, like I said, 47 years. Most companies, I think statistically go out of business within like the first 7 years.
Yep.
And so we talk a lot about business. You've had a bike shop, a cycling store, not a motorcycle, but a cycling where you sell bikes, you repair bikes, all that kind of stuff. Tell me a little bit about that. Was that something you started? Was it something you inherited?
Well, because I was swimming when I was, 14, 15 years old, I couldn't have a regular job. So I would fix bicycles and sell them. I would sell fruit and vegetables at the flea market, would collect junk and sell it. I'd make more money on a Saturday and Sunday morning at the flea market than I could make, working a minimum wage job. And that allowed me to not miss swim practice. And I was also involved in band. So it allowed me to make my band practices and my swim practices and still have plenty of spending money. And so I kept that up into college. I was working as a lifeguard and teaching swim lessons. And I drove by the dump when the semester was over at University of Florida, and there were like about 30 bikes all piled up. And I'm like, just throwing them away. So a friend of mine lived in what we call that I lifeguarded with. He lived in what we call the student ghetto. And he had this garage in his backyard that was about to fall down. So I made about 6 trips with my car, putting these bikes in the trunk, and took them to his garage. And his garage, it was about to be condemned, so I needed to use it. Called my dad, and he came down and we fixed the garage up, and I fixed those 30 bikes up. And of course, when this was the 1st of June, so all the students had left. So I had them all ready to go by the end of August when the new kids came in. So I sold all 30 bikes in 1 week, and I'm like, I don't really like college anyway. This is pretty good. This is just for the record. The reason I started the bike shop is a stupid reason to start. But it all worked out.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm like, okay.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you started it for the reason that most people start business because you figured out a way to make money.
Yeah. So, I guess it seemed like a lot of money at the time. And I like working on stuff and fixing stuff. So anyway, I got excited about it, and I called my dad, and I'm like, hey, I want to open a bike shop here in Gainesville. And he said, well, if you'll come home, I'll build you a bike shop in the front yard. And we happened to live on one of the busiest streets. It was still 2-lane at the time. We lived on one of the busiest streets in Panama City, Florida. And he built me a little 24 by 40 building. And November of 79, I was actually set my shop up in the carport and was parking bikes out by the road. And by March, he had the building finished, and we moved into the building. And yeah, the rest is, there's a lot of ins and outs along the way, but yeah, the rest is history.
Wow, that's incredible. I've heard some of that story, and I didn't remember the part where he told you to come back and he would build you a shop. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the privilege of meeting your dad a couple
Yeah,
times. I knew your mom really well, and just amazing, amazing parents.
yeah,
So,
they were.
no, yeah, no surprise. Well, that's awesome. So, when he built you a shop, and then when did you feel like you were like, did you feel right away like, all right, I'm a business owner, or did you kind of feel like, oh no, this is kind of a hobby. I'm just kind of picking scraps. When did you feel like you had like a business that you were actually running?
Well, you know, I never actually those thoughts never crossed my mind. You know, our senior year, it's still in the annual, so I can go in there. I go in there and read it every occasion. They ask us what we were going to do, and I don't remember giving this a lot of thought. So when I go back and read it, I'm trying to remember when I was, 17 years old, and this question was asked. But the question was asked, "What do you plan on doing after high school?" In other words, what are you going to do? And it wasn't like go to college or anything. It's like the question was based on career. And the answer I put in
Yeah,
there is I want to be a swim coach and a small business owner. So that was my answer at 17. I didn't really know what that looked like or what that would be like or even what business that would be. Just that was just my answer. Small business owner and swim coach or swim coach and small
no,
business owner, whichever order I happen to say it in. So
that's
so it felt natural and I'd always worked for myself. I mean, the only jobs other than working at a grocery store for about 3 months, which I hated, I pretty much was my own boss and self-employed. I was helping my dad in the fruit business or helping him with the gas station as early as fourth grade and helping him with the fruit stands as early as seventh grade. And then, when I got where I could drive, I would buy the fruit and vegetables from him and go set up on the flea markets, like I said, or fix bicycles and sell them. So
yeah,
I'd already figured out that uh, clocking in and clocking out wasn't for me. And
yeah.
when I did have some bosses along the way, and they didn't know what to do with me, so
Imagine that.
they wouldn't fire me because I was their hardest worker. The guy at the Gainesville pool who was my boss man, he was getting on to me about something one day, and I said, being the arrogant 19-year-old that I was, I said, well, you can fire me, but I don't know who's going to take out the garbage and clean the bottom of the pool if you do. So, and he's like, well, you're right, but don't do that again. I'm like, okay. So he
I
probably should
can
have
I
fired
can
me,
see
but he
that.
did. He didn't because he probably didn't want to take out the garbage and clean the bottom of the pool himself. So
I love it. I love it. It's called leverage. Uh, well, that's awesome. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned just working for someone else for like 3 months. We did a recent talk with my brother, Lucas Robinson, who you know,
yeah,
and he worked in a t-shirt shop in a mall for one holiday season. I was like, nah, this is not for me.
no,
And I've heard that kind of comment from other entrepreneurs online and stuff when they do interviews, and it's like they go and work for someone, they realize that this is just not for me. And it's also interesting that like what you were doing, like you saw opportunities, you saw these bikes, other people's trash. You're like, there's an opportunity. There's, maybe I can make a little money, maybe I can make a lot of money, but you were willing to figure that out,
yeah,
navigate it, play around with it, and see
yeah,
what the possibilities were.
that was it.
So, and you also like, so you had a somewhat of a passion around bikes in the sense that you rode bikes, right? You swam, you were in
Actually,
triathlons, right?
actually, I did love bikes, and that was my mode of transportation. But like most 16-year-olds, I turned 16, got my driver's license, and the bike went in the garage, and I didn't really ride it much until I got to Gainesville in school, and then I got me a bike, and of course I hardly drove my car in Gainesville. I rode my bike everywhere. And so,
But were you like a
no,
racer, or were you just using it for
actually,
transportation?
my bicycle racing uh, stuff started about 2 years into owning the bicycle shop. I had racers coming in and we were talking to them, and triathlons were starting to happen. So they were talking to me about swimming, and I was putting on some swim clinics for the triathletes, who were runners who were learning how to bike, and bikers who were learning how to run and swim, and they're like, "Hey, Steve, you need to start riding with us." So I started riding with them, and I wanted to do triathlon, so I started riding with those guys, and kind of learning about cycling. I knew how to fix bikes, but at that time, I didn't know how to fit anybody on a bike. I didn't know anything about racing. So, in my early years of owning the bike shop, I started actually learning about how you're supposed to sit on the bicycle, and how many RPMs you're
Yeah.
supposed to do, and what kind of training you need to do, and of course, and that sort of thing. Yeah,
Well, the reason I ask that, it's interesting. A lot of times people are like, follow your passion. And I've heard kind of people say counter to that, which I kind of tend to agree with, is like, yeah, maybe don't follow your passion. Find out something you're good at and let that become your passion.
yeah,
And you're mechanical, you're a problem solver,
yeah.
you're a fixer, you're a hard worker. You found something that you could apply that to
Right.
and then turn it into
Yeah, I
something
mean,
beautiful.
bicycles are cool. I love them, but I can, um, if I'm, remodeling a house, fixing a bicycle. Um, I don't really like working on cars anymore. I used to work on them because I couldn't afford new ones, so I had to learn how to fix them. But
Yeah.
I like working with my hands. Um, so it was a thing, and I
Yeah.
kind of learned how to fix bikes as a teenager. My mother used to tell the story is she would have to buy, the bicycle cables. She would have to buy, 6 sets of them for me to fix one bike because I was learning by trial and error.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
was always running me to the bike shop to buy parts. And so kind of
Yeah.
taught myself how to work on them, and I would talk to the mechanics. And I remember in Gainesville when I started working on them there, I was trying to learn how to true a wheel, and I went into the bike shop there, and I asked the guy, "How do you true a wheel?" And he kind of was being a little smart. He goes, "Well, it's real simple. If it's going this way, you turn the spokes on this side. If it's going this way, you turn the spokes on that side. And if it starts going up, then you got to loosen them. You got time. You did it really, really fast." And I thought to myself, okay, I don't know if you can cuss on the show, but I thought to myself, okay, asshole. I'm
Yeah.
smarter
Yeah.
than you think I am. I heard everything you said, even though you said it fast, and now I know how to true a wheel. And I went back and spent an hour and 20 minutes truing a wheel. And over time, I got that down where I could do it in about 5 minutes. So, but I
Yeah.
actually understood everything he said. He said it fast, like, I can tell you, in other words, I can tell you, but it doesn't matter. You won't be able to do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was like, you just laid down the gauntlet, buddy.
Yeah. F you, I'm doing
I,
this.
I remember, I know, I still remember this day what he said and how fast he said it, and with the
Yeah.
sarcasm he said it with. And I'm like, but as he was saying it, I had a picture in my head of how it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Yeah.
instantly. And that's the thing. That's how my brain works. And, he said that to me. I had a picture of how it worked. And then I went back and put it into practice till I got it down. So basically, if the wheel's going this way, you tighten these spokes or loosen these
Yep.
spokes, Um,
Yep.
and
I love it.
so, yeah. So,
Well, so you did the bike shop, you started that in college. Just real quick, what were you going to school for? What was
I was
your
getting a
degree
physical
going to be in?
education degree because I wanted to
Okay.
coach. Yeah. Um, I was interested in a lot of things. I was interested in building construction. I looked into that, and I looked into several things, but I'm like, well, I want to coach, so I need physical education. Um,
Did you actually finish and get your
I
degree?
never did finish. I
Okay.
did. I did go back in my 20s and get my physiology and anatomy classes, which, by the way, I made really good grades in. It was kind of unique going back to college in my 20s because in my teens, if I made a C, I was happy. But when
Yeah.
you're working and paying for it yourself, sometimes an A is really the only thing that's good
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I went back to school, I went back and took. I never finished, but I took the classes I needed, and I learned the stuff I needed to learn. Of course, I have continuing education uh,
For-
for my swim coaching that has physiology, anatomy, coaching techniques. I have to go through that. I have to take classes every year for swimming, classes every year, every 2 years for construction, and
Well, I was about to mention that because you have the bike
right,
business, you have a general contractor's
yep,
license, you have an HVAC
Yes, I
license,
do.
and you have the bike business, and you teach for public schools and
Yeah,
public
coach.
schools, middle school and high school, right?
I coach a high school team. I help run a middle school program, and I coach a USA swimming team year round.
Okay,
And then in my
so
spare time,
you're doing
I
a
make a
lot of
living in the bike business and fixing the house every now and then.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as I say, there's probably not a lot of spare time. Um,
And then, of course, got to
so
play music too. So you got to get to squeeze it all
yeah,
in.
well, and that's important. I think it is interesting that a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet, they do have a creative outlet. I play music. You actually taught me a lot about music as a kid, um, and obviously your family plays a lot of music. And I do see it's not always like in music or writing, or it's not always one specific thing, but I have noticed a lot of entrepreneurs have like a pretty cool creative outlet. A lot of times it is writing. They can use that in their business. Sometimes it's art, sometimes it's music,
Yeah.
but I do think that's an interesting element, and I don't really know the connection there. I don't know. You have any
Mhm.
thoughts on that?
No, I don't. I just know, I was, I enjoy the businesses that I'm in and doing, and I've got good people, so I'm able to get things done. But I was talking to the principal of Mosley the other day, and I told him, I said, yeah, in a perfect world, I would be coaching swimming and working with the brass section with the band over there, and that's what I'd be doing. But unfortunately, I still have to work for a living, so I'm only going to coach swimming.
Yeah.
But I like working with the kids.
Uh,
So if I'd be working with a high school band brass section and coaching swimming, if that's my ultimate retirement goal, is to
yeah,
be doing those two things. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. So you have all these businesses, and so you because you have all these businesses, you've created opportunities to work with a lot of people. So I want to kind of lead into the young men and women that you are working with and have worked with. I am a result of your generosity and your taking kids in. So my father, we've talked about on the show, passed away when I was about 14. And you came in, you were friends with our family, with my dad, and you came in and kind of finished what he started. You hired me to work at the bike shop. You taught me how to do things. You taught me how to work on a car. You taught me what tools were. I didn't have any clue. It's still to this day when I have an issue, I'm like, let me call Steve. Let me see if he can help me. So, but I'm not the only person you've done it for. You've done this for hundreds of kids,
Yeah.
girls, and,
Um,
and, and guys.
Somewhere along the way, one of them before you, actually, even before you, I think it might have been. I think it was Brian McGee because he was always witty. Brian's probably in his 50s now, so but I think he's the one that came up with the term "bike shop slaves."
Well,
Yeah, it was kind of so from
I
that time on. I thought so. It's like when I see guys and they'll come in and I'll go, "Oh, you're one of the bike shop slaves," because yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's very true in the sense that I've heard that term
yeah,
before. It's been like you're one of those, aren't you?
yeah,
But I think and we say that kind of jokingly, but there were so many people that came through, and I won't name names, but I look at some guys that I even was around, and I look at like what they took from that opportunity, and I look what other people took from that opportunity. And yeah, you weren't getting rich from working at the bike shop, but that was never really the goal. The goal
yeah,
was to put these often single moms would have these young boys, young guys that needed a positive male influence. And this has become a little bit of a topic, and we can weigh in as deep as you want. But
yeah,
with just like talking about masculinity and what it is to actually be a real man, what it is to be the alpha male. You hear all this kind of talk online and different stuff like that. And I talk about it all the time. I mean, the ability to kind of get a peek behind the curtain of what like a normal family looked like. And it was funny, your kids were actually just at my house a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to your son about this, and he was like, "Oh yeah, no, it was like great. I never really like knew hardship or this or that." And it was interesting because from the outside, everyone's dealing with the like same, family dynamics. But I'm living single mom's trying to hold everything
Right.
together the best she can, and then I'm able to kind of see behind the curtain of what it looks like for a man to provide. Your wife, who is absolutely incredible, to run a household, teach the kids, hold the house unit together while you're out providing, which honestly looks a lot like what my personal life looks like today. Is I go out, as Dave Ramsey says, I go out and kill something and bring it back,
Yeah.
and then my wife prepares it and makes it taste good.
Yeah.
I don't know. Talk to me a little bit about like what made you want to reach out to these young people,
Okay.
and what motivates you to still do
All
that.
right. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to point out that I am an alpha male. And the reason I know this is because I asked my wife if I could be an alpha male, and she told me I could until she told me different. So just wanted to clear that up real quick. So,
Oh, that's awesome. All right,
so,
we'll try and make that one go viral.
so as long as she says I can be the alpha male, I'll keep being the alpha male. But
Okay,
I have her permission.
I love it. I love it.
Uh, but things about that question. Looking back in hindsight, along the way when there were some struggles in the bike shop financially, I would ask my question, why did I pick this business? I could have been a jeweler, and I could have put $2 million worth of inventory in a 500 square foot space, but instead I decided to have a business where you need 5,000 square foot of space to put $400,000 worth of inventory.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
did I choose this? So, but looking back on that in hindsight, I mean, what other kind of business could you bring? And this probably shouldn't say this online, but bring 12-year-olds in, because some of the kids that started work for me were like 12, 13 years old.
hmm
Um, and you know, some of them would come in.
And I'll just comment on that before people go crazy.
Yeah,
Is like this was a great work
yeah,
environment. They
and
were
and
paid.
their
They were
moms.
working after school.
Every one of those cases, her mom came to me and said, "My son's 12. He loves bicycles, and could you just let him work? He'll work for parts, and you just pay him a little bit, And it wasn't like I was, wasn't like I had a child labor mill going on there. Okay, like I said,
Most
the,
of the
the
time, the
bike
kids
shop
were
slave
sitting.
thing was an endearing thing, not a,
Yeah.
we
Yes.
we didn't, and we kept the sharp tools away from the 12-year-olds.
Yes. 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 It was a great environment.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, continue.
and but. No, it wasn't. It really wasn't a plan. You know, for me, when I wanted to work with kids, I wanted to coach, wanted to work with kids. But in my mind, as a 20-year-old opening a bicycle shop, um, you know, I was like, my dad kind of even challenged me. He said, "Well, son, you're not coming into the bike shop till 9." I said, "Well, I got swim practice from 6 to 8:30." And he wanted, his business model was, you get in there at 6 and you work till 6 and you make the thing happen. And so that's the only conflict me and him had. He was like, you get fooling around with this silly coaching swimming stuff and just focus on the bike
Yeah.
shop. And you know, I was like, well, I love this coaching swimming thing. And so it never occurred to me
Yeah.
that the bike shop would end up being a vehicle for uh, working with the kids, and it's much different, and it actually is actually a better vehicle. I mean, the coaching swimming, there's a connection I make, and there's some things I can do, and not all the kids need me the same way there.
Yeah.
But the bike shop, that vehicle, was quite different, and I think it started. I think it probably started with a kid named John Gieske, which he's in his late 50s. So I was 20, maybe turned 21, and he was probably 12 when he came in. So, he's only, 8 years behind me, and I'm 66. So he's pushing 60
Wow.
now. But I remember his mom came to me. His dad owned a big furniture manufacturing thing there on 390. That big building on 390, big warehouse.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
so he was too young to work there with his dad because they did have some regulations there and inspections.
Yeah.
So he came in and worked for me, and he he learned, he started painting bicycles and building custom. I mean, by the time he was 13, he was painting them and building them and selling them. And so I was like, oh, this is, and then from that, it was just one guy after another. Patrick Shaw, who's another guy that I told you about. He lives up there in Colorado.
Yep.
He was my first guy I brought in. Same situation. I knew his family, swam with his older brothers and sisters, and he came in. He had severe dyslexia, and he was my first kid that had dyslexia that I worked with. So that was interesting to me. I learned a lot. How to navigate that, and so so it made it easier when I got to you. But he's very successful. He does some kind of multi-level marketing. I see he pops up on my reels all the time. I think he's very successful.
Yeah, we've messaged a little
Yeah,
bit.
and his girls, one of his girls, I think ended up swimming for Stanford. She's really fast, and of course he swam for a little bit, but he turned out, he went the other direction. He became a basketball player. He played 4 years of Division I basketball, and then went into business and stuff. But anyway, that's just a couple of names, blast from the past. Like I said, there's been sometimes grown men come in and I go, remember when I worked for you? And I'm like, no. So,
would you say a lot of the young guys that came in what percentage, if you just had a random percentage, like did mothers or parents approach you versus you kind of recognize a need?
Well, at first it was usually, first few, the mothers would come to me. Patrick worked for me. His younger brother, who was about 4 years younger than him, after Patrick went on into college, his younger brother came and worked for me. And then, sometimes a kid would just come into the shop 5 or 6 times. He's getting stuff and he's talking about bikes, and I can tell he was into it. And I would be like, "You want to work here?" And their eyes would get this big.
Yeah,
work here, work at the candy store. So and most of the time those kids are like, their pay card at the end of the week, we'd balance it out, and I'd be like, well, you only owe me $100 after this week. Here's the whole company store routine, 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in bed. Oh, my soul. They owe their soul to Steve's bike shop. But it wasn't my fault. They were the ones buying my stuff.
Yeah, buying all the stuff. No, I remember those days. Be like, well, you took $20 to go to lunch here. You took $20 here. Be like, all right, you owe me $50.
Yeah, exactly.
No, so how many? I know, obviously, everyone kind of goes in different directions and whatnot. A couple things. So I want to ask about the maintaining those relationships. What do those look like, later on? And the reason I'm asking is I get people asking me questions about business. I get people asking me about finance. What should I do for retirement? What should I do for this? And you get these questions. And so I'll obviously I answer those, and I have relationships where I kind of help and mentor people in different levels. But it seems like you really did it at scale, and it was kind of like you just had this sandbox where everyone could kind of hang around, be in, and you were able to just in part teach just by osmosis, people being close. And I think I tell people I've come to believe that it's not so much quality time, it's just time. Because exactly. Some of the best time I have with my kids is when we're driving in the car, going camping or going skiing, and we're in the car together for 2-3 hours. And, a guy that I follow calls it junk time. You're just able to chat and be close to one another. And you also get to see, I got to see how you responded when a customer was mad, or when, when wasn't always great, but most of the time it was good. But you just get to see real life though. You get to see the good and the bad. You
Right.
get to see, I got to know you personally as well. So like you took me on family vacations. I got to I was at your home all the time. So I got to see how you interacted with your kids. I got to hear your philosophy of like how you navigated your kids going from middle school to high school to young adults. I got to see how you navigated hard conversations, fights with your wife, just because I know it may seem like you have a perfect marriage, but you do get in trouble because you irritate your wife
Yeah.
sometimes.
The only time that is like when I don't do what she says. But,
Yeah, exactly. But what? But I want to go into some of that too. But before we leave, did you, when you were talking to some of these young people, like what was your thought process? Was it just kind of an instinct? You're like, I don't know, this seems like a good kid, seems like he's interested, or were there situations? And I'll go to like my specific situation. Like I remember where I was when you came to me
yeah.
and said, "Hey, do you want to come work?" Blah blah blah. Like, take me through the
Well,
process. Like, were there intentional?
I think, you know, I believe in the ability to hear from God, and that people out
Hmm.
there can put that wherever they want to, and whatever whatever their belief system is. But I remember, I remember at your dad's funeral, just that thought came to me of I need to bring Adam in to work for me. It wasn't I need to
Yeah,
bring Lucas in to work for me or Justin in to work for me, your two older brothers. It was you. And I'm sure the reason for that is they were older, and Lucas was already pretty much doing his thing. He had his hot dog carts going,
yeah,
and then later on his snow cone things, and all that stuff. So, but anyway, I just remember having that thought. So I just went to your mom and said, "Hey, we think about Adam coming to work for me." She said, "That'd be great." And so then I came and talked to you. And of course, my interaction with your brother Lucas was a little different. Basically, I just provided, a place for him to park his hot dog cart when it wasn't being used, and a place for him to his
yeah,
ice machines, so he could run his stuff. So it was a little different relationship. But he was older. You were 14. He was probably what, 17 already?
yeah. 16,
Yeah,
17.
yeah. And of course, he's playing baseball and running for class president and doing all the school stuff.
Yeah.
And you were like, I don't want to do school
I
stuff.
didn't know what I was doing. I was lost.
Yeah, yeah, y'all were doing, you're different paths, doing different things. So anyway, I just
Yeah,
remember that thought. So I followed on that thought. It's like I got a kid now that's he just graduated from high school, and he's an intern mechanic at Panama City Toyota. And I just remember he kept coming in the shop bothering us, and I'm just like coming in with his mom. His mom didn't speak English at all, and he came in the shop, and I'm like, I just looked at him. I said, "You want to work here?" And of course, that was when he was about 13 or 14, and so he
yeah.
worked for me for his freshman through his senior year, and then he decided he wanted to be he liked mechanicing, but he decided he wanted to be a car mechanic. I told him, I said, you could make $30,000-$40,000 a year being a bike mechanic. I don't know why you'd want to be a car mechanic. They only make 100, 120 if they're really good.
That was probably hard for him to
Yeah,
decide, huh?
yeah. I said, gosh, making a bad decision, man.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to recognize like it wasn't like the clouds didn't part,
No,
a ray of
it was
light come
always just
down.
a thought.
I thought,
Yeah, like
yeah,
with this kid, I was actually getting mad at him because he was questioning something, and I actually just got through lighting him up. Just like I'm like, because we were busy, and I just kind of lit him up right there on the spot. I'm like, we're doing this. Get out of the way, da da da. And then right after I lit him up, the thought happened, and I'm like, "You want to come to work here?" So I just hit his head off, and then asked him.
listen, he
He's
knew
like, "Yeah."
he can't complain. He knows exactly what
He
he's
knew what
getting.
he was getting into from the get go. Yeah.
Well, I think that I think two things when it comes to like mentoring and helping and just being a positive influence is I think that um, not everyone has the opportunity. I think there's probably more opportunities than most people realize. But I do like this quote. There's a guy, Seth Godin, a big blog writer. He says, "Don't look for a mentor, look for a hero." And the idea behind that is you may not have a Steve Burdeshaw in your town. You probably do, but you may not know where he is. But if nothing else, you can find someone. You can find someone to follow online. You can learn, through online. But if you can get a personal relationship with someone and have like a mentor type relationship, and we never used that language growing up. I never was like, Steve's my mentor.
No,
It was just like,
there's no, it was all organic for sure. And it always has been. It's
yeah,
always been organic. I've never, you know, hung out a shingle saying mentoring available.
you don't have a
Could be
program
some
that you're
cussing and
selling.
strong language involved later down the line.
So you're not going to pitch us on your course for mentorship at the end?
No, no, I have no course for mentorship. I am I'm a true believer in flying by the seat of your pants on that kind of thing. So
Yeah,
that's what I do. It's kind of
yeah,
how I coach too. I mean, I walk into swim practice with a plan sometimes, and I see what's going on, and I go, "Yeah, this isn't working today. Let's do this."
yeah,
The water's 92 degrees. I don't think we're doing distance today, guys. I think we're doing sprints, and we're getting out and getting in the shade of every 20 minutes, so we don't all die of heat. I
yeah,
walk in
yeah,
on a sprint day, and it's rained, and the water's 82 degrees. I'm like, okay, we're going to do distance today. Just
yeah.
whatever's needed.
Well, well, I think that's also kind of like the characteristics of good entrepreneurships or entrepreneurs is like recognizing what works. And it's like
Yep.
you might have a plan, but that ability to pivot
Right.
it helps with success just in general
Yeah.
in every area of life. So, nah, that's awesome. Any thoughts before we move from like the kind of relational, kind of bringing people in? If you have like, if you were talking to young guys that are trying to help people, or young guys, girls who are looking for help, just any thoughts around that?
Well, I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, it, I didn't set out to, it wasn't like this thing. I'm going to help people. It
Yeah,
was,
yeah, yeah,
I like being around young people, and I like teaching them things. I like watching them learn. So, in a selfish sense, it's fulfilling to me to watch them
hmm
progress and grow. So, you know, yeah, it's that sort of thing. And like I said, there's been some good friendships built out of it. I think about some of the guys that I hadn't talked to in a long time. I mentioned Brian McGee earlier. I keep telling my wife, I said, I'm going to reach out to him at some point. I hadn't talked to him in, 10 years. And the other guy,
yeah,
Patrick Shaw, I probably talk to him every 10 or 15 years.
yeah,
I'll call him out of the blue sometimes. And there's others. And, these are people you probably know. And, Jerry Hood, he's got to be 50 now. I think him and Brian were about the same age. And, um, just guys that I reach out to from time to time. So some of these guys I remember running into Buddy Boykin last night, actually. He was one of the
yeah,
guys. Of course, I'm meeting David
hmm
Woods today. He was one of the guys. And,
yeah,
and then, John Graham, we talked about him. He's
yeah,
touring across the country right now on his bicycle. And he came and,
yeah,
he's in his 40s now. He came and spent about 6 months with me. And now he's back off on the trail riding his bicycle. And yeah, so out of it, there's a lot of guys that I still have some sort of relationship with. I mean, I don't spend, you know, daily time with them or even weekly. Like I said, some of them I call every 10 years. Some of them, me and you hang out or talk several times a year. Um,
hmm
and, uh, and some of them we talk to once a year, so it's all different kind of relationships, but, yeah.
yeah. That's
So,
awesome. Well, I know that from someone who is a recipient, if y'all are listening and are on the fence about helping people. I do think a little bit in our culture. Um, there's a guy again, Scott Galloway, who I like. He's I've quoted him a couple times, but he says that Michael Jackson and the Catholic Church have done more to harm young men's ability to get mentorship than anything else.
Yeah.
And I think people are nervous about it. They're apprehensive about like, oh, is that okay or this or that. And I would encourage people.
Yeah.
It's a great impact that even you could say, well, I'm not that successful. It's like, well, you're probably more successful than that 10-year-old or 15
Yeah.
or
You mean,
18-year-old.
and sometimes it's just like I say, it's just time, just time spent together. You're maybe teaching them stuff, but it's just like you said, some of the things, just seeing some of the interaction that goes on. And back to the
Yeah.
Michael Jackson thing, the one thing about USA Swimming, we have a thing called Safe Sport. So we have to take a class yearly. I call it the Don't Molest Children class, which
Yeah.
it's pretty rough, but it's not. It's really some of it's kind of rough, but actually it's got good stuff in it, especially uh, for young coaches because it talks. You got there was a time when I was a 20-year-old coach coaching 16, 17-year-old girls and guys,
Hmm.
and fortunately I had the good sense to handle all those situations
Yeah.
correctly. But anyway, that class kind of deals with that about how you deal with now you got texting and all that and how you deal with
Hmm.
all that. I always in USA Swimming, I'm not allowed to text the swimmers unless their parents are on the line, and then I do have reminds and stuff like that. But I always tell in high school is a little different. They can actually text me. I always tell my high school kids in front of their parents. I said, if you're texting me, it's always going to be yes, no, 3 o'clock. It's going to be a short answer.
Yeah.
If you text me to try to get into a conversation with me on a text, I'm going to block you. So it's a
Yeah.
different world we live in about that. But I am very educated on the do's and don'ts, and
Yeah.
and like I said, that class is more about keeping you out of trouble inadvertently.
Yeah.
There's no reason for a 66-year-old guy to get into a conversation or a debate via text message or on social media with a 16-year-old. You know,
Yep.
when they do that, I block them. I call their parents. I'm like, hey, Johnny has a problem with me. We all need to meet if we need to resolve it with the parent present. And that's what the class
Yep.
teaches you is those sorts of things. Don't. And of course, the relationships we have at the bike shop obviously were different because you weren't with me 2 hours a day. You were with me 6 hours or 8 hours a day. So it's a little different
Hmm.
situation. But yeah, I don't know what the answer to all that is,
Yeah.
but
Well, I do have a question on that. So if someone, we both come from kind of a traditional Christian
yeah,
background and they kind of set different kind of, so we grew up in that kind of
right.
culture. Um, when like if you had a female working with you, I mean, like me and you would go to breakfast,
Yeah,
we would go to lunch, I would be in the car with you. Just as like in full disclosure, like everyone talk to whoever you need to talk to make sure you're following proper protocol.
yeah.
But what are some of the things that you have done in those situations?
Well,
Like, would
I
you?
would, I don't know, but I know that every situation's different. I'd meet
Yeah.
kids for lunch. I still go to lunch with Sophie. Every once in a
Hmm.
while she'll meet me somewhere for lunch, and even she was in high
She's,
school.
in her mid 20s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'd
Yeah.
meet
Yeah.
for lunch,
Yeah.
and then Hope. Hope's actually coaching now, so we see a lot of each other. But when Hope was coming up, she she was being raised by her mom, and so she came to work at the bike shop. And but what we would do, like our protocol, like we had a swim meet in Tallahassee. She would ride with me, but the protocol was she would ride with me, and her sister lived there. I'd drop her off at her sister's house. Sister would bring her back
Hmm.
and forth to the meet, and then when the meet's over, she would get on me, and I'd take her straight to her mom's house. Most of the time, I had either a mom with me or some other swimmers. I think there was only one occasion when there was nobody else, and so that's. I'm not sure I would do that now. I knew Hope really well. I knew her mom really well, and I'm not sure that. And that's been 10 years ago. I'm not sure
Yep.
that I would do that now uh, because optics is everything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that and not a lot of girls that I've run through the bike shop, but Hope's an interesting story because her,
Yeah.
Wesley came to work for me. He was 12. Remember,
Yep.
he came to me and he goes, "I want to work at the bike shop." He's this 12-year-old that weighed more than he weighs now as a 37-year-old man. And I told him, I said,
He's a big boy.
guys, I could get in trouble for this one, but I looked at him and I was like, "You can come to work for me, but you're going to have to lose weight." And I told him some other things he's going to start doing. So he
Yeah. Yeah.
came to
Yeah.
work for me, and finally, he met Claudia, so that motivated him. He lost that weight so he could get Claudia to marry him later on. So I'm not sure I helped him
Wesley's
with
a
the
great
weight
guy.
loss as much as his love for Claudia did.
Yeah. Yeah.
He chased her because she said yes. But anyway, I bring up Wesley's story because I brought Hope to the shop, and she started working there, and she got to know Wesley, and Wesley is one of those guys like me.
Hmm.
It just comes natural to him, and I always kid him that finally they have like a 2-year-old daughter now, and they're 37 years old. I said, "Well, you spent
Yeah.
nearly 20 years raising everybody else's kids, and then you get to raise your own."
Yeah.
So he's one of those guys. But anyway, so Hope got to know his family, so she ended up marrying his brother. And so I always told her, I said, "I hope this thing works out because since I'm responsible for it, because you wouldn't have met Wesley and you wouldn't have met Jason if you hadn't come to the show."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's good to be wise and be
yeah.
careful, but I
There's never
also
any
think there's just
isolation at the shop or anywhere.
yeah.
That's the thing is, and that's what they teach you in those classes, those safe sport
Yeah.
classes. Like I don't have an office per se, like at the swimming pool, but they talk about, if a kid comes in your office, you leave the door open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, even with the door open, if you're going to meet with them, it's better to meet with them with their parents. If you're going to text
Hmm.
them and put their parents on the thread. Um,
Yep.
if you need to talk to them on the phone, hey, we need to talk. Make sure your parents in the room. Put it on speakerphone. Hey, Mrs.
Yep.
Smith, are you in the room? Yes, and then have the conversation with them. That sort of
Yep.
thing. Uh, you know, those just staying above board, staying above reproach.
Yep.
It's just
Yeah.
not being stupid.
Yeah. I think that's the
Yeah,
big thing. Because there is so much need, and I do think that like it's like, oh, I don't want this or that. And so, so I think sometimes people just kind of
yeah,
leave the arena
yeah,
altogether. But I think a little bit of common sense, and
yeah.
there's so much help that could be given to young people
Right.
just by being
Yeah,
wise.
and so
So,
like going to lunch or breakfast with one of these kids, if they meet you there and you're in a public place, then you're talking about
yep.
usually I would have those meetings if I was going to make them captain or something like that. I'd always have those meetings over breakfast or lunch in a public place where they get dropped. They either drove if they're old enough to drive or they picked up, that sort of thing. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
Well, I want to dive into a couple just
okay,
kind of finishing things here. And I want to talk about my dad, and then I want to talk about dyslexia.
okay,
So we'll start with dyslexia. So you said that you worked with another guy that
yep.
is actually here in Colorado. And so from the outside, you're not dyslexic. Like, tell us a couple things, just like your understanding of dyslexia and kind of like your takeaway. I think it's always interesting as a dyslexic, not being able to read well, not being able to spell well. Like we often look at the downside of dyslexia, and for years it was crippling insecurity. It was like, oh, I'm stupid, I can't read, or this or that. So from the outside, what do you see? What do you see when you're around dyslexics and when you just think about it broadly?
Well, the thing I noticed right off with Patrick is, very, very talented in his ability to talk to people. And that's how he pretty much makes his living talking to people. He's network marketing and he basically does these blogs. And he's basically coaching people up, and his ability to talk and convince and coach you up. Just he always had that ability. I mean, he would like at 14 years old, he could, you know, he could sell somebody 2 bikes that already had 6. You know,
Yeah.
you know, he's great at sales, and of course he's great with his hands. You know, working with the the mechanic, and he was good with all that. And of course, um, his mother, I think, had a little more resources than yours did. So she had him in all kind of special schools and special stuff that to help him. I don't really know what I hadn't talked to him about it. So I don't know how far along he got on his reading ability and those sorts of things and how he coped because, he went to college, he made it all, he graduated from high school, made it all the way through college, bachelor's degree. And, um, I'm assuming that he had to, she had him in classes that would help him with his reading. So I'm assuming he must have done pretty well. Otherwise, he couldn't have got through through school. And they didn't have,
iPhones.
they didn't have Audible books, when he was going to school.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in trying to think how old he is. Let's see. His sister was 1 year younger than me, and I think he was 4 or 5. So he may be pushing close to 60. He may be like 58 now. So yeah, so there was no so yeah,
Yeah.
he grew up in the time when there was no cell phones and not even personal computers. So he was
Yeah.
dealing with stuff. But I noticed all that, and then when you came along, I noticed the same thing. You really learned everything really quick. You were really good, and your communication skills were great. That seems to be the thing. I've got a girl right now. She's not actually working for me. She's swimming for me. And the biggest trouble we're having with her is get her to admit there's a problem and get help because she's embarrassed about it. She's just 8th grade. And I know her dad real well, dad and mom real well. But, uh, I had a little conversation with her and she's like, I don't have dyslexia. I'm like, okay. I know for a fact that you do because I've talked to your dad. I didn't say that. I'm like, okay. So
Yeah.
I just, I kept it light and I just told her about Patrick and I told her about you and how successful y'all are and about y'all working for me and tried to encourage her that, and I just told her, so, you're kind of like that too. You're really good. Your verbal skills are really good. Your communication skills are really good. Your argument skills are phenomenal. And you're really artistic. You're able to you have all these positive things. You know, I didn't say this, but like you just see things upside down and backwards or whatever, and you have to so we'll see how that comes along. Me and her dad are working
Yeah.
trying to find her some more help. But the biggest problem she had in school last year is she was embarrassed, so she would refuse the
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
The help. She actually is at a school where they have help, and
Yeah.
she would refuse it because she didn't want anybody to know. So I think one of the things, if we got to get especially for these young kids, we have to remove the stigma of them
Yeah.
thinking it makes them stupid or not as smart as everybody else. Because in my opinion, everybody I've met so far that has this thing called dyslexia is way overcompensated for the other talents they have. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you can't do this, but we're going to overcompensate and give you all these other great abilities.
Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, that's
Yeah, I think one thing I think is interesting, and honestly, a couple things. So one of the reasons we started this channel to talk about dyslexia is, when my son was born, who's now 19, I started to just think about how I talked about it and how I viewed myself because I knew that it's hereditary. So I knew there was a possibility that he would be dyslexic. And then he wasn't. And then our daughter was born, who's about to be 16, turned out to be dyslexic. But the same thing, I was like, I want to be very careful how I talk about it, how I frame it,
right.
because I don't want them to feel insecure. And it really is. I mean, I could tell you story after story of times where I felt embarrassed, insecure, broke down in tears,
Yeah,
all these different things. And now, but like if you talk to my daughter, it's like there's not an ounce of insecurity in her.
right. Well,
And
Livy is proof of my theory that people with dyslexia are overcompensated with other gifts that make them
Yeah,
phenomenal people.
yeah,
Because she is a
yeah,
phenomenal
yeah,
person.
yeah. Phenomenal. I mean, she's a writer, creative,
Yeah.
like, yeah. And so I think it's really learning how to harness, like you're talking about, like you have a deficit in some areas, we all do,
Yeah.
and then just understanding that, but we also have a unique way of seeing the world. And I forget the actual statistic, but it's something like a large percentage of millionaires are dyslexic.
I
And
can believe
so,
that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so, and another thing I think is interesting off the dyslexia, but I think it's interesting. We're both in service businesses. You also have a retail, but I think we're seeing a shift in our culture a little bit in the conversation, the online conversations, I should say, where people are being more open towards like service-based business. It feels less blue collar. It feels less like when the internet started just blowing up in the early 2000s. It was like that was the thing to do. I felt insignificant having a painting business when everyone else was having an internet business. But now you're seeing with like AI coming out, it's actually turning where blue collar service based businesses are actually potentially going to be really the area to be in. And
I
so,
think South Park did a show on that, didn't they?
yeah, you did Dirty Jobs, right? Wasn't that the name of it?
No, I'm talking about the South Park episode
Oh,
about
South Park.
the South Park episode where the two handymen end up having a space race because they're the only people that know how to do stuff. And
The only people that know how to build
all
anything.
the other guys were holding signs at Home Depot, you know, trying to get a job. All the handymen were making all the money because they got to do stuff.
I have
You got to
I
see
have
that.
not
It's a
seen
great one.
this.
It's a great one.
I'll have to pull that
But
up.
yeah, I did meet the Dirty Jobs guy. I love him, and he did another show where he would help people, and he ended up buying a bunch of bikes from me and helping this guy that was a salvage Santa who would provide bicycles for. So, a guy had been helping for years with parts and accessories and fixing truing wheels when he couldn't true them. I true them for him because he was providing bikes for the kids that couldn't afford them. And anyway, the Dirty Jobs guy came in and gave him a bunch of bikes and had a big deal. So I got
That's
to get my
awesome.
picture taken with him and stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, in to kind of finish, I figured we would do just like a little personal kind of touch. Like I said, you were friends with my dad,
Yes.
who passed away very young. He passed away at 41. And it was less than ideal kind of circumstances. I've talked a little bit about that on the channel. And then obviously he left three boys and a single mom. And you were able to come in and you were definitely closer to me, but then you were also relatively close to the middle brother, Lucas.
Yeah.
And then you had a relationship with Justin,
Yeah.
not nearly as
Yeah. Me
close.
and Justin never really connected, and which was, yeah. I mean, just we just didn't connect, and that was kind of sad
Yeah,
to me because I thought he was pretty cool, and I remember him and David Woods and had their little band, and I thought they were all
yeah,
really cool, but I just, yeah, never. I mean, me and him talked, and we were friendly, but we never had that. We never made that connection. Just couldn't
yeah,
quite get it. Me and Lucas connected on the business level and talking about business and the things he was doing. He was playing baseball, going to school, being president of his class, and running. Well, and had his hot dog stand, which I think he had you running it for him most of the time. And
yeah. So funny story. I was driving his truck and I damaged the side, the one of the doors. I bumped into something. And so Lucas, in his wisdom, he was like, you know what? You don't have money to pay this back, but what you do have is free weekends. So why don't you run the hot dog stand
perfect,
Saturday and
perfect.
Sunday? So I lost my weekends for a summer, uh, paying that back.
Yeah,
But no, I mean, but honestly, like I said, we did a conversation with him just a week ago, and I told Lucas, he's watching him do what he did was pretty incredible. I've told people if I had to like talk to one business person he would be, pretty close to the top of that list just watching what he's done. He's a brilliant mind and has a little kind of like sprinkled dyslexia, I think, on there. I don't think he's really dyslexic. He has some dyslexic characteristics. But going to just like on the personal side, I thought it'd be fun just to kind of talk a little bit about it. Is so you had a relationship with my dad who also had a painting business,
Right.
and what do you? Because my dad was dyslexic, and so we did a special video talking about that as well. What do you remember? I mean, it's been so many years, but like I guess a story or two about him, if you even knew he was dyslexic, and just kind of final thoughts on that.
Well, I didn't know he was dyslexic. I probably suspected it. Um, he fond memories of him. Riley knew he knew how to work hard and he knew how to play hard. And
Yeah,
he had y'all out there on that water, on the weekends doing stuff. And but you know, I watched him, remodel a couple of houses and move y'all into that old house that your mom loved and remodel that. I remember that. And he's generous man. I mean, I was in a bind. Things weren't going well. I had one of these foam roofs on the bike shop, and the roof coating was deteriorating. And I told Riley about it, and I said, "Man, I got to get that coated." And the next day, he had a crew over there. They coated my whole roof, no charge. And I mean, it was,
wow,
even then, it was probably a eight or $9,000 job. It's probably a $30,000 job now. And he coated my whole roof for me. And I think the next time it got coated, I think you coated it for me. So, and then
I think I bought some
I've had to coat
material.
it one more time since then. And yeah, but but yeah, that's the kind of things I remember. You know,
Yeah,
I remember I was managing a big property, and when he first started, I helped him get a couple of jobs uh, out there, and so yeah, it was
that's
it
cool.
was kind of cool. And you were just a little guy running around with your little what do they call
Rat
it? Your
tail.
little rat tail back there.
Yeah,
You're
mullet.
about
Well,
two
yeah,
foot high and had your little rat tail mullet going on, and I'm like,
yeah.
who's this little kid?
One of my first memories of you is actually after a hurricane. You were over in Lynn Haven
Yeah,
in that back kind of sunroom area, and me and my dad and my two brothers, we were over there helping you demo
yeah.
and hang sheetrock. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Your
Yeah,
whole family and the Hathaway family and your family and I think the Woods all came over, and I was pulling the carpet out, and y'all helped me get all the furniture out of the house and helped me get the carpet to the street so we could start drying out
yeah,
the house because we got 18 inches of water. So we literally less than 12 hours after it had flooded, we had everything out of the house drying out, and that's probably what saved us because I didn't have any flood insurance, so I had to do all that.
yeah,
That's how I learned the construction business. No
yeah.
money, no insurance, and it's
By necessity.
time to learn how to fix stuff. Except that's not what they say on South Park. They don't say stuff.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, I wanted to say, super thankful for you and obviously super thankful for the things that you've done for me in my own personal life. And it's also awesome to see that you do it for so many people. And so I wanted people to see this. I wanted to document it. Hopefully, people will watch this for years and decades into the future and hear stories of how people can influence other people's life and your intentionality to have conversations, have the hard conversations, say, hey, like,
Yeah,
you should probably lose some weight, or hey, like, you need to learn how to do this. Or I remember you coming over and helping me run cable that I didn't know how to run.
yeah,
I remember 2 weeks or a week before our wedding, you crawling underneath my house, helping me run plumbing that I didn't know how to do because I didn't have the money and didn't know anyone else.
yeah,
And those types of things, not just the acts, but even if you didn't do any of the physical things, just the availability of you being able to just show people how to live
Yeah.
in a productive way, in a way of you know being a good human. And regardless of belief systems and life choices, you've been someone who has always been willing to help everyone. And so kudos to you for that. I am greatly appreciative of that. So
Well, thank you. It's not. It
yeah,
wasn't a. It wasn't a life goal. It was just doing what
it's
came
just who you
natural.
are.
Just doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
doing what felt natural. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, to people like find you don't have to look that hard. We're in a world full of people who need help
Yeah.
and are looking to be just recognized. And sometimes it's a conversation and sometimes it's more intentional, but it's worth the sacrifice. I know personally dozens of people, a dozen people that I know personally that you have dramatically impacted their life. So to those people out there, you know, take the time. It pays off. It's worth it. So, thank you, Steve,
Thank
for
you.
spending this time with us. And huge thanks to you and your wife. And I will just a little shout out to Terry, your wife.
Yes.
She is absolutely incredible. Behind the scenes, and I've actually said this to your kids. I know that because I actually asked them, I said, do you ever feel like you missed out because your dad spent so much time with other people like me? And I remember your son's like, no, I never really thought about it. And it's good. It's good because I always kind
Yeah.
of like in the back of my head was almost felt a little guilty about that. But I do know that you constantly having people in your home and you're going out and doing things, there's someone behind the scenes making sure all the trains run on time, making sure all that the household is held together
Yeah.
and functioning, and there's a safe place to raise kids
Yeah.
and be able to bring other kids into. So, huge thanks to Terry for all that she allowed to happen,
Yeah.
and
She,
just beautiful, sweet, yeah, yeah,
she even
amazing.
allowed y'all to have. Well, she didn't allow. Remember, she got mad at y'all. You had the food. You had the food fight in her house.
We still talk about
Yeah.
that.
She pulled things together in a hurry on that one, didn't she?
She reined it in
Yeah.
quickly. Mama Bear.
Yeah.
One of the only times I've ever seen her mad. And even that, it wasn't bad. It was almost kind of comical. But
Yeah.
she brought it into the food fight.
Yeah. Yes, she did.
All right, guys. Thank you all for everything. And take a look at some of our other videos. I referenced Lucas in this conversation. Lucas is my brother, and we just recently did a conversation with him. So go back and listen to that as well. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, guys.
See you.